Well, hey there again, my friends. Welcome back. I guess I'm getting back into my groove a little bit, kind of overcoming the COVID nightmare, trying to get my mind back on track, settling through the chaos, even with the unpredictability of the future. But it's one of the things that we know is that the future is always unpredictable for us. And the sooner we come to terms with the unpredictability of life, the sooner we can take those chances to make a better life. Like I said, my wife and I, it kind of kicked us in the butt to try to buy a piece of land and to get out of here and to get back to nature, because being in nature helps me to feel like I'm more in touch with what some might call God. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Who is God? Now, this is such a pretentious / arrogant / I could give 1,000 verbs, or what, adjectives? Sorry, adjectives. It's been a while since I was in English class. To describe all the different ways people feel when you bring up the term God. And I will tell you that up until I would say up until about even 5, 6, 7 years ago, I still refuse to use that word because it had such a negative connotation attached to it. But that's not the direction I want to go here. A thought occurred to me this morning when I read a comment or heard someone say on something, don't recall where, who said something to the effect of, I love going out into nature because I can, I can feel God, the presence of God. And I thought, yeah, I know, I agree. But what exactly is this God? And we anthropomorphize everything. If you're not familiar with that term, anthropomorphizing means anthro as humans and morph to change into basically anything that we want to understand in the universe. We put a human face on it to try to understand it. And we've done that very same thing with God, or what you might call a universal mind, or energy, or perhaps even if you believe in the Gaian hypothesis that the Earth is actually alive in its own way and aware of itself and regulating. I guess the question would be, with the Gaian hypothesis, is the Earth alive? In other words, does it regulate itself and adjust? Or is it just random processes that happen? That's a big question, and one that people really have some pretty strong opinions on. But I feel like no amount of textbooks that you can open, no amount of schooling or research you could do, could really begin to top and of course those are all major components, and especially if you're looking at the microscopic world, so you can see what goes on behind the layers of the plant, the cells, the membranes, the way that they turn sunlight into energy and produce sugars for us. The whole cycle of life is fucking amazing, for lack of a better term. And I know that from, a scientific perspective, a lot of people who really understand biology well say, well, people just don't understand that this could still or is still all random. They think it just looks overly complex and therefore they attribute a God to it. But it's not just that way. In other words, a lot of people aren't trying to justify the belief in God or a God by morphing their surroundings to say, look, this proves God. There are people like me in the world who have been more or less atheist or agnostic all my life and said, when I was younger, I told myself this. I said, okay, I was introduced to these ideas of religion. I said, it's not for me. Went to Sunday school with a friend. It was supposed to be a snowboarding trip. Anyhow, there was no snow, so we just sat and did Bible study. It really sucked. And I've always found religion stuffy, oppressive, short-sighted, and in many instances money hungry, especially when it's the false prophets, the evangelists that stand up there and tell you to send in your money to them. They're all frauds, every single one of them. There's not a single evangelist that I would consider to be a real God-believing, or they're either completely delusional or they've convinced themselves that, which that's delusional, or they're lying right to your face, and most of them are lying right to your face. Faith healers, they set that shit all up ahead of time. It is a complete joke. And yet people know this. Think of this as going to see these faith healer evangelicals as the same as a person who goes to a wrestling match for WWF or WWE, whatever, and says, no, this is 100% real. Instead of knowing, there's a little bit of real, a little bit of fake, but it's generally set up. So anyway, I'm going to steer away from churches. I'm not going to talk about that because churches are community for people. I have nothing against people going in and spending time with community. But what I really wanted to touch on was not religion itself or God, but why is God so angry and why is God so good at censoring? And I don't mean God as an actual figure, but rather, why does God have to be frustrated and angry with other religions? And of course, that's a rhetorical question. He's not, or it's not. It's just that people are, and they feel a certain way about things. I've had some strong feelings about religious groups in the past, especially when I see how they oppress people, especially like the way that they excommunicate in Mormonism and in, which I actually like Mormonism more than others, but mostly Jehovah's Witnesses and the way that they lead their flocks with fear. And so I'm going to back away from that now and get back to my main point, which was, as I got older, it's God became apparent to me in a different way. I don't have to define it as God. I call it the all, because God always implies that it's a man or a he, and I don't like that. I call it the all, and the all-encompassing. It can't be, if there's a God, then the God has a wife. Let's put it that way, if it's a he, because yin and yang are everything. So I understand it through almost a Zen perspective, that we'll never know the whole details, all of the details, we'll never understand the deep complexity, but we're not meant to, and that all we can do is try to laugh at the riddles. But some of those riddles involve very complicated relationships between plants and animals. Now, I'm always fascinated with the chrysalis, or the cocoon. The chrysalis has always been one of my favorite terms. It's what happens to me when I take psychedelic mushrooms, and I kind of go off on my own and get in this little ball, and I just kind of feel awkward and weird for a while, and then I reveal myself as my butterfly, right? A lot of folks don't know that when a cocoon, I should say when a caterpillar forms a cocoon, the caterpillar completely dissolves inside that cocoon. All of the parts turn into a soup with just a couple of very small basic structures. And then all of those molecules and atoms rearrange themselves in the shape of a butterfly, and then opens its wings and flies away. How does a process like this form through random mutation? And it's always one of those questions that comes up. And I'm not posing it as any type of an aha thing to say, oh, this proves God exists, because I don't believe in creationism. I do believe in evolution. I do believe that things evolve. But the question is, why do certain things evolve with very complex processes that are unnecessary? Why wouldn't nature favor simplicity? And this is what we call emergence, right? The emergent properties of things where different animals share the same types of behaviors, or how 2 hands and 2 feet are very common even with totally divergent evolutionary structures. There is a certain blueprint that nature takes. And I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded way is I believe that what God is evolution through the unfolding of a flower, right? When you look at a rosebud, it doesn't look like much. It starts out as just this little bud, and hopefully not covered with aphids. And as it starts to open up, it grows, and those petals pop open, and they reveal themselves, layer after layer after layer, and it looks different continuously until it completely opens up, and then it sits there. It becomes fertile, it pollinates, the bees come. Then those petals all fall off, and people figure the rose is dead. But there's a rose hip left behind, which you can make tea out of, right? And what I'm getting at is that it's that whole process of renewal. Because when those seeds drop, a new rose bush grows, all of a sudden you have dispersal and a regrowth, a pattern, which is what human life is, which is what everything is. Why do things want to continue living? why does evolution happen at all? Why do things want to become more complex? And that's one of those things that I guess over time we may reveal a few more of those secrets, but in general it's okay to be ignorant of it, and it's okay not to know. And I'm content with that. But that's what God is to me. And I wish that the people I've talked to who have told me that I don't believe the right thing, that I should believe in Jesus as my Savior, I say, you know, you and I, we can both go out in the woods and see the beauty of nature. I just call God by a different name. Heck, the name Jesus didn't even exist 2,000 years ago. So if anyone's using the term Jesus, they're using a word that didn't even exist when he lived. In that term, the situation, is it okay to call Jesus nature? And why does Jesus have to look a certain way when we have no photos? You see what I'm getting at? I'm not trying to diss anybody who believes in Jesus. I'm saying if somebody else can believe in the same ideas and energies, and the fact that you're saved through nothing else but nature, or if you think of Jesus as your own mind, which is the mind path that I've followed, which is the Christ consciousness, if you will, the idea that you can only be saved through Jesus Christ means the anointed one, which means you, your own brain. You can only be saved through your own changing of your perceptions of things and your own mental alchemy. And it's so crucial to think that way. There are so many people who are upset and angry, and they think, you know, it's always somebody else's to blame. And they can't blame God, so they blame the devil. But what we should be blaming is chance and laughing at it, you know? There are no absolutes. God doesn't punish the wicked. We see babies die all the time. And what is that, just God's will? No. There is chaos within the organization. And I guess that's the best way I can put it. And chaos is a theory that you might think is it just means, oh, disaster or whatnot. Chaos is an actual study. It's a scientific field. I've got a couple of really good books on it. One of them that was sent by a subscriber named Blaze Harmon. I wanted to say thank you if you're out there. And I don't forget those things. I was actually reading it the other day. But chaos as a theory includes fractals and the way that things start out seemingly meaningless, okay? And then after a period, a pattern emerges. We can only see not even a fraction of the pattern that's unfolding. So if you look at evolution itself as creation, you could realize that maybe 7 days and 7 nights doesn't have to be literal. Perhaps it's 7 space days, 7 solar days. You know what I'm saying? But no, people would rather argue and tell you that you are going to hell because you don't believe what they believe. And that's very saddening sometimes. It's saddening because I can't hold a conversation with a Christian who believes in dogma, that extreme of dogma. I'm not saying all Christians, because I've met a lot of very intelligent, inquisitive Christians who just say, this is what works for me. And I say, that's great, cool. But don't push that shit on me, right? In the way that it's literally taken. Because I've read it, I've got the Bible, I've got the parts of the Bhagavad Gita. I want to get a copy of several religious texts. I do have one from science, Christian Science. And I also have another commentary of the Bible, a really thick one, and it's just fascinating because people have put in so much love into that belief system, which is why I expand on that. I respect it more than I ever have in the past, but I really wish people could see the metaphors for what they are. I won't pretend to know them all. And I won't pretend like some of the people I've listened to in the past actually got it correct when they'd sit there and try to decode it all. I think it's completely subjective in a lot of those passages, but there are some very bloodthirsty passages as well, and we have to remember that it's, and once again, selective bias, confirmation bias to what we read and want to believe. And in a confusing world, we would rather have a book that tells us what's right than have nothing at all, okay? So some people believe a book, some people believe their leaders or government, some people follow authority all the time, and there's people like me who maybe I'm just kind of bummed out that I actually don't have a system that really has worked for me for my whole life. I guess I'm not saddened. I'm a truth seeker. I want to find out what's real, even at the cost of my own self value or my feelings about life, or like Sure. Do I want to believe that I die and live for eternity and enjoy and see all my friends and family and meet new people? Hell yes, I do. Don't you think anyone would? I mean, really? So, if you are a believer in, say, heaven, and you think that other people who don't believe in it are just idiots, just remember, who wouldn't want to believe in that? We can't force ourselves to believe in something that doesn't resonate with the reality of what we see or what we know. Doesn't mean that it's not true. Maybe I'll find out the hard way. If I'm lucky, the Mormons are right, because they say that there's a little period of where you can go in there and actually in this like darkness and decide and whether you want to take Jesus or not. And at that point, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm on it. I mean, heck yeah, I'm on it. Don't send me to hell for saying bad words. I really like the Mormons when they come to my door. They're nice people. Jehovah's are too, generally, but if you inquire too much, they can get a little flustered. I had a little old lady kind of get mad at me and leave because I questioned about certain passages, and I thought, well, you're here telling me. And I mention that because of how pushy religion has been on the world. It's nothing new. It's not an insult. It's a fact. Since the Crusades, the Inquisition, people were strung up and gutted and quartered and burned for not believing what another person believes. And we finally have a time today where we can be secularists but still believe in a higher power, and that's what I'm trying to convey. That is the message completely through this whole video that I would like to say, is that many of us still believe in a higher power, a natural consciousness, natural awareness, and have an insight about these things, that we agree that yes, no, this maybe isn't all by chance. Maybe there is a blueprint or an underlying pattern, but it doesn't have to be your God. It could be any God over any period of time. And to anthropomorphize that God and to put it into terms within a human lifetime that we can understand is very, let's just say, arrogant and a little bit, well, I can't think of the word. Sometimes I forget a word I'm looking for. But I think that we're all on the same page in a lot of ways. We all believe that, or I should say the one religious people and myself, I just don't try to put a name on it or a face on it. And it's okay if you do. I'm hoping we can all get along on these things eventually, But I know that people feel threatened if others don't believe what they do, so that's a hard one. Anyhow, thanks for listening. I'll talk to y'all next time. I'm out. Be well. Thanks to my patrons. Thanks to my friends and family. And thanks to the environment for not being all loud while I'm making the video.